I was hired to fix up a cabin, but someone else was already living there. When you do small repairs for a living, you learn the difference between remote and forgotten. Remote means a long driveway and bad cell service. Forgotten is when weeds grow tall in the middle of the lane and trees lean in like they want to close the path behind you. The job came by email from a property manager with no last name, no company logo, and no small talk, just a lockbox code and a simple list. Replace 2 window latches, patch a soft spot in the porch step, fix a drip under the kitchen sink, and check the smoke detector. I have done enough of these jobs to know the usual way you show up: fix the little things, take a photo, and leave before the woods get too dark. The address led me off the paved road onto gravel, and then onto a narrow lane that was hardly a lane anymore. Branches brushed both sides of my truck and the mirrors clicked against pine needles. The air smelled of wet bark, leaf rot, and cold shaded dirt with no neighbors around. There was no mailbox, no sign, and no fresh tire tracks. The cabin sat back among the trees as if someone had hidden it on purpose. It had dark siding, a metal roof, and a porch that sagged just a little. I parked and sat in the truck for a while because the quiet felt managed, like someone was holding their breath so I would not hear them. Finally, I got out with my tool bag and walked to the porch. The lockbox was right where the email said. I opened it, punched the code, and took out the key. The key felt warm, not from the sun, but warm like a hand had just held it. I told myself not to imagine things and stepped onto the porch. My boot hit the second step and it flexed under one corner with a thin metal squeal like a nail moving against metal. I crouched down and saw fresh pale sawdust in the seam, bright and new against the old gray wood. Someone had been cutting or drilling under that step recently, and there was no reason for that except the job I was sent to do. I tried the front door, and it opened easily, not locked, and not even properly latched. Inside, the air smelled damp like pine dust and old dishwater. I set my tool bag down and called out hello maintenance, but no one answered. The cabin was one main room with a loft, a kitchen along one wall, a small table, and a couch with a neatly folded blanket. It looked like the kind of place people dream about to get away from everything. But then I noticed things that did not belong: a mug in the drying rack with a brown smear, a spoon left in the sink, and a folded sheet of printer paper on the table. I went to the living room window to replace the latch as listed, but the latch was already bright metal with clean screws and a trace of oil still on it. I stood there confused, thinking maybe the list was wrong or someone had already fixed it. Then something moved in the loft, a careful shift of weight like a person trying not to make noise on the boards. I asked louder if someone was there, but there was only silence. I moved to the kitchen and saw the fridge humming with a recent grocery receipt stuck to it by a fish magnet listing bread, eggs, deli meat, and water. My phone showed no service. The folded paper on the table kept pulling my eyes, so I opened it. In heavy block letters it said, "Don't fix the window." My mouth went dry and I set the note down carefully. From the loft I heard a slow, quiet breath. I grabbed my tool bag and backed toward the door. On the way out, my boot hit the second step again, and it dropped suddenly under my weight. A bent rusty nail caught the side of my ankle and went in deep. The pain was hot and sharp, and blood filled my sock fast. I stumbled off the porch into the yard with my tool bag dragging. Behind me, the front door creaked open and a tall man stood there in a dark hoodie and dirty jeans. He did not run or shout. He just watched me calmly like I was a dog that had wandered into his yard. I said, "I am leaving right now," but my voice sounded weak. He tilted his head, then smiled a small smile that showed his curiosity was satisfied. He tapped the window near the new latch and said, "Don't," in a quiet voice. My ankle throbbed with every heartbeat, and blood ran down into my boot. I backed toward my truck, trying not to limp too much. He followed at the same slow pace, knowing I could not move fast. I reached the truck, threw my bag inside, and climbed in, slamming the door and locking it. When I turned the key, the engine did nothing. The dash lights flickered and died. I looked up and saw the man standing by the hood. He pointed down to show a thin wire running from the battery to a stake in the ground. He had done it while I was inside the cabin. He walked to the passenger's side and rattled the handle, then hit the window hard 3 times until the glass cracked and crumbled inward. His arm came through, reaching for the lock. I grabbed my hammer and swung, hitting his forearm and then his hand. He made an angry sound but kept trying. I pressed the horn hard and the loud sound tore through the trees. The man froze, listening, then quickly pulled his arm back and walked back to the cabin, disappearing inside. I popped the hood, climbed out carefully and pulled the wire and stake free, throwing them into the weeds. Back in the truck, the engine started right away. I reversed down the lane fast with branches slapping the mirrors and pain spiking up my ankle with every bump. My phone got service on the wider road and I called the property manager number, but it went to voicemail with no name. The email address bounced back when I replied. I drove to the nearest gas station where my ankle buckled and blood had soaked through my boot. The clerk helped bandage it, and someone called the county deputy. The deputy took my statement and later went to the cabin with others. They found the lockbox gone, the porch step replaced with fresh wood, and the inside cleaned up with no mug, no spoon, no note. But under the kitchen sink the P-trap was new, and on the inside of the cabinet door in heavy block letters someone had written "You came .my ankle healed, but it still aches when the weather changes, and sometimes the old sting comes back like a reminder." I do not take remote jobs anymore, and I avoid lockboxes I did not install myself. If a place feels too quiet, I leave right away. I thought that was the end, but last week a new email arrived with no logo and the same list. Replace 2 window latches. Patch a soft spot in the porch step. Fix a drip under the kitchen sink and check the smoke detector. At the bottom it said the same code. This is a 100% true story that happened to me and my now wife. I was in a very bad relationship back in October 2012, and my life felt completely dark and depressing while I lived at my parents' house. One day I saw on Facebook that my now wife was looking for a roommate in her family home, which turned out to be an old cabin built in the early to mid-1800s. It was not a charming mountain cabin at all. This was an actual slave cabin from the 1800s with poorly shaved, uneven logs held together by fine cement that was cracking and falling out in many places. The roof had large hardwood logs pitched up steeply at about 60 degrees with small boards in between. Someone had moved the entire cabin and placed it in a regular neighborhood of 1980s houses, so it looked very strange sitting there. The family that once owned it were rich old plantation owners from somewhere between South Carolina and Virginia, and the road is even named after them. The cabin had been fixed up with a master bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, electricity and cable, but when I first moved in the air felt thick, heavy, stagnant and uncomfortable, like the whole house was angry at me. The power was not on yet, and everything felt dark and creepy, but it was my only option at the time, so I moved my things upstairs while my now wife stayed downstairs in the master bedroom. My girlfriend at the time left me because I was moving in with another girl, but that was the smallest problem I had. The weird things started almost right away. One evening we were having a small housewarming with my now wife and 2 of her friends. We were all standing in the kitchen laughing, drinking and talking, when suddenly there was one very loud single pound on the back door. The door was thick, heavy, solid wood, and it rattled hard from the blow. I jumped up and opened the door immediately, but there was nothing outside. Whoever or whatever did it would have needed to open the screen door, hit the wood so hard, slam the screen shut, jump the fence, and run away all in less than a second, which was impossible. One of our guests got so scared she left and never came back. After we settled in, strange events continued. I started waking up suddenly in the middle of the night, hearing scratching sounds right under my bed. At first I thought it was a mouse, but the scratching was long, slow, and about a foot long, and it happened directly under my head. I pulled the blanket over my head and tried to sleep. The scratching kept happening night after night, always around 3 in the morning. Over time it became more bold. It would start on the side wall, then move to the corner where the wall meets the floor, then slide slowly across the floor, stopping near my head before dragging down toward my legs and then to the closet. It sounded exactly like a person lying on their belly pulling themselves forward with fingernails, but sliding backwards instead. It was terrifying and happened like clockwork. One night I got so angry I turned on the light, stood up, and shouted at the top of my lungs, "Shut the fuck up!" several times, and the scratching stopped instantly. After that I refused to sleep upstairs anymore. My now wife also started feeling uneasy. She said she heard a woman's voice coming from my upstairs room, even though the upstairs was just one open room with stairs leading straight up and no door. We both began sleeping in the living room because neither of us wanted to be alone in the house at night. The old TV started acting crazy too. It would change channels by itself, turn off and on without anyone touching it. One night while we were both asleep on the couch, I had a very dark dream. In the dream I was floating in the center of the room watching my own sleeping body. I started leaning closer and closer to my own head. At the same time, I could feel it from my real body, as if something was leaning into me. There was heavy pressure building in my skull, like when you drive up a mountain or fly in a plane before your ears pop, and I heard a loud tea kettle whistle getting louder and louder. The pressure became too much, so I snapped awake, and the moment I sat up, the TV turned itself on, even though it had already been on when we fell asleep. We quickly got a new TV after that. We later learned more about the previous tenant who lived there before us. He was a very strange man who received huge amounts of mail order catalogs every single day, sometimes 10 pounds of them. He dropped off the rent early every month but barely spoke to anyone, and my father-in-law, who owned the house, knew almost nothing about him. When we moved in, I had to remove screws and nails from every single window and door because they had all been sealed shut from the inside. The only door not screwed shut was the back kitchen door, where we had heard the loud knock. In the warming drawer of the oven we found dried scraps of what looked like rabbit food mixed with lettuce, carrots, and rat droppings, which was very weird. It seemed like the man had been shut in doing something dark, and we even worried we might find a body buried in the backyard. We started to think that whatever dark energy or spirit was in the house might have come from him and his activities. One afternoon I tried to spend time upstairs again, reading on the bed with my hound dog. The sun was setting and I started to doze off when I heard a slow creak from the old original window. The window opened inward on hinges, and both me and the dog woke up instantly, staring at it. I told myself it was just the wind and tried to go back to sleep. A little later the same slow creak happened again, and this time I watched the window open very slowly and deliberately, as if something was doing it on purpose to scare me. I ran out of the room. The very next day I tried again, convincing myself it was nothing. Same time, same conditions. I was reading and dozing when the creak started. I watched the window open slowly once more. This time I stayed put and thought, "Fucking ghost," with a fuck you attitude, refusing to react. The entity did not like that I was not scared, so after a moment the window slammed shut so hard I thought the old single pane glass would break. I stayed calm, got up quietly and walked out, but once I was outside the house I freaked out. After that I screwed that window shut permanently. By this point we never slept alone anymore. We stayed together in the downstairs master bedroom, which felt safer because it was an addition to the original cabin. The moment you stepped out of that room, especially at night, the whole house felt darker and creepier. The best thing the ghost ever did was push my now wife and me closer together. We had known each other since 2nd grade, growing up in the same neighborhood. We went from old friends to roommates to boyfriend and girlfriend, and eventually got married. Having a common scary enemy made us bond very quickly. As the first year passed, the strange events became less frequent. The more we improved our lives, the weaker the spirits seemed to become. I got a better job and felt happier. She got a better job too. We stopped drinking so much wine every night and started becoming better, happier people. It felt like the ghost lost power when we were positive and growing. But it was not completely gone. One Saturday morning around 9:47 my wife left for work, and the second she closed the front door my alarm clock started blaring loudly upstairs. I never set an alarm for that time, especially not on a Saturday. I tried to ignore it, but after 10 minutes it was still going, so I had to go upstairs, even though that was the worst area for ghost activity. I followed the sound to a closet, opened some boxes and found the old alarm clock that had been packed away for almost a whole year since we moved in. It was the kind that plugs into the wall but also has a backup 9-volt battery. I tried to turn it off, but it would not stop, so in frustration I threw it out the window onto the street. That is most of the story for now, though there is still a little more that happened later. The old slave cabin definitely felt like it hated me at first, but over time, as my now wife and I grew stronger and happier together, the negative energy lost its hold. We came out of that dark time closer than ever and eventually built a good life. The cabin brought us together in a strange way, even if it tried to scare us away.